AI is worth applying to the core of whatever it is that you're offering. No matter what industry I'm in, what defines my company, what defines my organization, why do people find what I provide valuable? And that is what I need to be applying AI to in order to drive the existing metrics that already exist. And if I can't figure that out, one of my competitors will, and that is an existential question.
Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, said, if your best idea for increasing ROI with AI is laying people off, you lack imagination. Something to that effect.
Hello, and welcome to the Tech Pubcast, a behind-the-scenes look at what it really takes to write and publish a technical book. I'm your host, Jess Haberman. I'm a literary agent, publishing consultant, and former acquisitions editor with nearly 20 years of experience publishing books. And today, I'm thrilled to welcome Jacob Miller and Jeremy Mumford to the podcast. Hello to you both. Want to share a brief intro, maybe starting with Jacob?
Yeah, so I'm the Vice President of Platform Intelligence over AI at Pattern. It's an e-commerce technology accelerator, and been here at Pattern about 6 years. Before that, I've done academia, big corporations, and also an author now.
Yeah, my name is Jeremy Mumford. I'm a lead AI engineer here at Pattern. I work closely with Jacob. I've been at Pattern for 4 years. Before that, I was at Brigham Young University, where I was doing research and projects around deepfakes and AI image recognition.
Well, thank you both for joining today. Congratulations on publishing your first book, Architected Intelligence, Principles for Building AI-First Organizations and Technologies. So candidly, you guys and I worked together on the proposal. We didn't work together in a traditional agent relationship. Do you want to talk a little bit about sort of like what got you started on this whole journey?
I think the idea of the book originated partly in presenting at conferences. There were ideas that we were presenting that really resonated with the audience, that were more timeless in nature rather than just shifting with the technology. I think that was part of it. And second is we really saw a pain point where AI requires this multidisciplinary approach. And so different people would come from different backgrounds and make the mistakes that are missing from their discipline that they needed to rely on others. And so that was the original concept as we were putting that together. So me and Jeremy were collaborating. This was end of 2024, very end of 2024, when we were first going through this ideas of proposals. Also, I had some conversations with a couple acquisition editors, I believe, who had just, reaching out. They're always out talking, meeting people at conferences and such. And so that started the process. And so we started putting together that outline, the concept of the book and the proposal. But our book was a little bit tricky because it's a hardcover book. It's not a traditional tech book with here's blocks of code. We intentionally wrote the book so that it was frameworks and principles based, so that it would have been relevant 3 years ago and it would be relevant 5 years from now, which is really important in AI because it's changing so quickly. And so we were focusing on those foundational principles that you're going to hit these problems even as the technology changes. So that's what made it kind of tricky as the concept of a book, because it's not purely tech, here's these blocks of code type of book. And that's where things got tricky as we were trying to navigate it. And then, we spoke with you, Jess, in terms of how do we navigate this really awkward, kind of weird book that doesn't quite fit the normal sense.
Who were you writing for? I think that's probably where this helps the genre sort of land more in a business strategy or, tech strategy topic area, right?
Yeah, I think for us, when we were thinking about who the author and target audience would be, we were like, who are we trying to reach? And I think for us, it was tech leaders and tech architects, right? Now, that can be anyone from the C-suite level all the way down to senior engineers who are making architectural decisions. But thinking about how can we help those people who are charting these new territories of AI, all of the complex decisions they have to make. There's so many unknowns and so many people are jumping into disciplines that are potentially new to them. Software engineers have to now understand data science principles. Data scientists now have to understand software engineering principles. And leaders now need to fuse both of those disciplines together in this kind of new age of AI engineering. So our goal was to write a guide for those people.
So how do you define what is architected intelligence? And And how does that connect to like the way we think about AI these days? Like AI's currently, really gone through an evolution in terms of how we define it. So what does architected intelligence mean in that case?
The architecture for us was solving AI problems went through the same series of steps, basically in the same order, with the underlying principles and trade-offs for each one of those steps. And it started with the first one with output and saying, hey, is this truly valuable? How will it be used? How will it be used, downstream? How will it be interpreted? And understanding that holistic experience of how you're executing. Because if it's not valuable, then what are you doing? And especially right now in AI, and over the last couple of years, one of our mantras has become interesting is only loosely correlated with valuable, because everyone would say, I can do this really interesting thing with AI.
Mm.
And so bringing people back and centering on how does that change the user experience? How does it change value? The second step was data, and data's changed a lot because unstructured data is now on the table. And unstructured data, text and audio and all these bits of data that aren't in neatly defined, rows and columns like they used to. And so the management practices around that, the knowledge management systems that you need and those best practices around that is it's changed and evolved. The third step is the models themselves, which most engineers are more comfortable with. Things like context engineering and optimizing those optimizing your models, dealing with cost versus latency versus intelligence and managing that. Finally, that steps into observability, it's kind of this fourth step, and looking at it from a software engineer's perspective of understanding the logs, metrics, traces, like what is it doing? But then the data science observability concept of like, is it getting it right and why is it operating the way that it is? And the fifth kind of component, the fifth step of this is with enablement. In order to scale this, how do we do this not just as a one-off, but actually deliver this at scale and continually? And so whenever you're attacking an AI product or AI-infused process, you really need to hit each one of these. And it is a multidisciplinary approach. Jeremy mentioned, data science and software engineering is the principle too, but there's also data engineering principles and knowledge management system principles that also weave throughout.
So what are the top priorities or problems that you're hoping your book is solving for these tech leaders? Like, what are they struggling with the most right now? And sort of where do you think this book can really help them?
I think for leaders making decisions, there are a few critical areas where they're being asked new questions that they haven't before. I think Jacob highlighted several of those. I think there's a lot of questions around navigating unstructured data. AI has kind of unlocked this whole new pool of data to be used at scale. All this text and audio and images that previously you couldn't automate or process in a large scale way. Now you can with AI. So leaders are trying to figure out, how can I take my extremely valuable data moat and combine it with AI in a way that's not just interesting, but also useful. I think additionally, there's questions around like, what should an organization's North Star be? What output should they be targeting? You see a lot of people just frantically trying to figure out how to use AI. And, quickly putting a chatbot on your website to tell your customers like a quick summary of the article they're already looking at is not super useful. How do we go deeper than just like slapping a chatbot on a website? And so that's like where we feel like our book really shines, is really talking about how do we transform organizations in the same way that the internet era did or the electricity era did. A similar transformation needs to take place with AI that goes much deeper than just some surface level changes.
Yeah, I hear you on kind of everyone's first step is like an AI wrapper on whatever their tech is.
Yeah.
So how do you like advise leaders to think about like the ROI of AI or efficiency gains or, cost savings? Are there certain like leading metrics that folks maybe are missing because they're maybe so focused on maybe reducing headcount or, being as efficient as possible in terms of the organization or making more money or, like what are the key areas where you think these leaders are like maybe should focus and maybe aren't really, maybe it's a blind spot for them right now?
Yeah, one of the principles that we emphasize early on in the book in that output section of what's valuable is that AI is worth applying to the core of whatever it is that you're offering. And so if I'm in, no matter what industry I'm in, what defines my company? What defines my organization? Why do people find what I provide valuable? And that is what I need to be applying AI to in order to drive the existing metrics that already exist. And if I can't figure that out, one of my competitors will, and that is an existential question. And so the concept of, hey, AI is really cool. I'm going to apply it to all the things that I don't like doing and aren't central to my company, just so I can trim some headcount around the edges or something like that for efficiency. It's one of the messages that we try to pull people away from and say, like, no, why do you exist? What do you need to effectively drive? And then work backward from there. And then there's all sorts of proxy metrics depending on the industry that you're in terms of the efficiency and the effectiveness that you're getting out of those applications and models. But it's so easy to take your eye off that North Star of like, why do we even exist as a company or as an organization? And that's what we should deliver first.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
just to like tack on something to what Jacob said, Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, said, if your best idea for increasing ROI with AI is laying people off, you lack imagination, something to that effect.
Yeah.
And so hopefully people have a little more imagination than just let's cut headcount. Ideally, if you leverage AI correctly, you should actually be hiring people because your company is growing so fast. So
Yeah. I like that, your business exists for a reason. There is some core competitive advantage that you can maximize rather than, like kind of focus on the edges. How much do you get into kind of the sort of technology architecture of your tech stack, the way that maybe you're working with models? Like, how far into the sort of technical tinkering of your infrastructure do you advise in your book?
it's a fun question of like, how deep on the technical do we go? Like, this is something that like Jacob would have to pull me back on, is because I like to go deep on the technical side. And I think the North Star for our book was, as Jacob said earlier, let's make sure that this book is enduring. We wanted to make sure that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, this book is still useful to people. And so we made a very conscious decision at the beginning that we would explicitly never name a specific tool, a specific vendor or provider, a specific AI model. We would never include any code throughout the book. And that decision, we feel, has paid dividends because as you read through the book, it all feels extremely relevant. This is a common thing I find when reading AI books. I go through and I read it and they say, use this code with this model. And instantly I'm like, okay, well, that's outdated as of like, a month after release. And so we're really excited about how we intentionally structured the book in that way by being very descriptive and detailed in how people should architecture their approaches and decision making and design in a way that technical leaders will benefit from, but without explicitly naming any tools or vendors or code that we feel will be outdated.
We were still able to provide the nuance and depth, and to the degree that we would provide a specific example, say like temperature within an AI model. We would say, here's the underlying principle of how to create this variation in approaches. And some of the current examples that exist today are to modify things like A, B, and C. So we would, to the extent that we would center it on today's technology, it would only be as examples rather than this is how you create the variation. We say, no, here's the underlying principle, and here's an example expression of it, however the technology changes, that principle will endure.
Yeah, I think that's really smart in terms of kind of trying to keep your book evergreen as long as possible. It's hard these days to keep a book like relevant for 3 to 5 years. Let's talk a little bit about your process. I'd love to hear more about what did you learn? What did you like wish that you knew earlier that you might know now after having been through that sort of end-to-end process of publishing a book?
First, it was difficult because we had an awkward audience that we were shooting for. I mean, it's like a hardcover book. It's a little bit different, but it's tech, but it's not code in tech. So it was this weird niche. One of the things that I didn't understand early on is that you have these publishers, and some of them we'd been talking to, some of them we wanted to reach out to, is that they have all of these forms of like, hey, this is what we want like a book proposal to look like. And I didn't know until, working with you, Jess, that those were guidelines rather than strict. This is exactly how your book proposal should look like. And talking to some of the publishers, it was interesting how they said, oh, I really like this part of your book proposal. And it was something that they didn't ask for as part of like their standard book proposal form. And so the idea of they do have like a book proposal form that's kind of a format that they're looking for. We don't want that to constrain how we're approaching the situation. We want to put our best foot forward because we're trying to make it easy and simple for them to understand who our audience is, how we're approaching it, and what those ideas are.
Yeah. It's helpful because publishers don't look at each other's proposal guidelines. A good acquisitions editor is going to find like the sort of gold nugget in whatever template it's in. You made a good point about your audience being a little awkward, being a niche and it being tough to really narrow to that focus. But I think one of the biggest misconceptions in publishing is I've got to write a book for a big audience. Like, no. If you can speak directly to a specific audience, you don't want a very small one, but tech leaders is still a big audience, and sort of decision makers in tech companies. And like you said, that also includes senior architects and things like that. So if you know exactly who you're speaking to and everything you write is really tailored to that audience, it can work really, really well. I see folks struggle when they're trying to also talk to developers while also talking to leaders. Like, it's so hard to hit the same message for people who have really different goals and motivations. So what do you think helped you really speak to that audience? Did you interview folks? You work with tech leaders all the time, so I imagine a lot of your own experience really helped you there. But how did you own your narrative for the audience that you think it would resonate with best?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of two things, understanding who to write with them the most. I think first off, Jacob and myself have a network of people that we talk to on a regular basis. And we started to see a pattern of common questions and common needs across the industry. But number two, all of those things tied back to things we were seeing ourselves in our current job and our current roles at the company, combining that broad overall view we saw across the industry with our personal experiences, we felt we had a really strong vision for who needed this book and what it needed to be about.
Jeremy, did you have any particular major learnings from the writing process itself? Like any things that you sort of maybe was a misconception early on and that you sort of figured out as you went along?
It was very eye opening for me. I think Jacob had written a couple of textbooks before and been involved with some writing in that way. The extent of my writing had been college based. I did a thesis and I did papers in college, of course. But writing something to the level of a whole book with a traditional publisher is a very large project. And I don't think I really knew what I was getting into when I agreed to sign up with Jacob. How long and big of a project this would be. Well worth it. But I had no idea. I had no idea of all the different phases of development, how you get assigned a development editor and then a copy editor and then a layout editor. I didn't realize the complex communication structure between different representatives at the publisher. I didn't realize that the proposal process could be tackled in such a vigorous, intense way, and that there are certain ways you need to write the proposal and contact certain people or you'll just disappear into the pile. So all of these things were a learning experience. And then also just learning about how to build the habits of writing, all those sort of habits that come in and make it so you actually make your deadline.
Yeah, right. So how did you guys manage it as co-authors? I've seen this work really well in some cases, and I've seen it be a complete disaster in other cases. So, it sounds like you guys are still friends. That's great. Good to see that, So you survived writing a book together. So how did it work for you? Where did you kind of find routines that made it work? And where was there tension?
I think for us, it was finding time each week to visit each other's houses and just sit down and write the book. What would often happen is Jacob would come over to my place 1 or 2 times a week, and we would cast Google Docs up on the TV, and we would vigorously debate a concept or an idea, and just kind of imagine the two of us just pacing around the living room, gesturing at the screen, getting really excited about ideas. And then we'd maybe pause and we'd each silently write for 30 minutes. And then we'd reconvene and we'd kind of do it all over again. And so there's a lot of rounds of that. And then often what it is one person would write a chapter and then they would pass it off to the other person. And that person would go through the entire chapter and kind of put their own polish and spin on it. And then we'd go back to the other person and that person would do that process again. And we did that for all 12 chapters. So very time consuming, but I feel like the end result became extremely polished as a result.
I will say it's a lot easier to go. If I weren't co-authoring it, I think the quality would have been worse because having another person to just be like, are you sure about that? It's just someone else to prod that. And like, that's kind of a bad idea, which Jeremy does it in an excellent diplomatic way, but he's very good at communicating. Like, are you sure that's what we want to communicate on one part? And then the second is that there were certain areas of the book where each of us were bringing expertise. So certain chapters, it was like, oh, Jeremy's leading on this in chapter 9 because he just knows it better than I do. But I'm over here in chapter 5 and I know chapter 5 and I know that content better than Jeremy does. That doesn't mean Jeremy doesn't contribute to chapter 5, but there's kind of like a designated lead for that chapter because it follows their own subject matter expertise. So I think having that as a natural lead proportion and then going back and forth was a super healthy dynamic. I mean, we're still friends. I think we're more friends now than we were before even.
That's
And
impressive.
so we succeeded, I think.
That's great. Yeah, I think collaboration is really important, even when you are a solo author, to have tech reviewers who can really kind of push against some of your assumptions and can help you make your points better is really important. But that's great that you guys had kind of a like whiteboarding / writing retreat kind of structure. That sounds a lot of fun. I like that. I like that a lot. Jeremy, you mentioned that, it was worth it. It's still valuable. What are your, I know it's early on in the process of the, publication, but what are your kind of expectations going in? And what are you hoping that this book will enable for you both in terms of your careers and your and future work and things like that?
Yeah. I mean, it should hopefully come as no surprise to anybody that writing a book is not a get rich quick scheme, But I think we went into it, eyes wide open with, the purpose of us writing this book is, I think, one, Jacob shared that he had some ideas that he was very passionate about, and he wanted to share those with the world. And I think that should really be like the root reason for anybody wanting to write a book is you have something you want to share with a part of the world. I think two, I think this will benefit us moving forward. I think there will be benefits to our personal knowledge and understanding of AI. I feel like both Jacob and myself have really honed our understanding of how AI works and at an organizational level to such a degree because of writing the book. And then, of course, there's all the benefits that come from being able to say that you wrote a book on a subject like this. There are benefits that come from that. But I think for me, it was really the process of writing the book and the knowledge gained from it that is probably the bigger factor for me. And then quite selfishly, the sense of pride of being able to say I'm an author is very fun as well. Being able to tell people, oh yeah, I wrote a book. That's pretty cool.
I'll add that it does require a certain level of hubris in art or as an author or anything like that, because there are a million, content creators out there. And especially if you're focusing on something deep, you're not just throwing out some 45-second TikTok. Like this is something that's going to take like hundreds of hours of your time that you're going to dedicate to this. And it takes a certain level of like hubris to say like, well, I have something to say and the world doesn't have it otherwise, and to be able to push that forward. But that's where that passion comes from because, the world, I love the quote, the world is a museum of passion projects. The world is full of these passion projects that people have pursued. If you're writing something that you're passionate about, because you're bringing that passion, that depth of expertise to share with everybody. And I would add that the process does force clarity, like that discipline and clarity. And so I love the line, I think it was Paul Graham who's popularized it, but it's to write is to think, is writing forces you to clarify your thoughts and put them on paper and adjust, go through it slowly and carefully. I think that's one of the drawbacks of AI writing, actually, is like, oh, I had some general concepts, then AI filled it out. The pressure process of like AI is tremendously useful. It's very useful for us to help us with the writing, but you going through the process and pain of writing and the trade-offs and what we truly mean by every word is something that sharpens your understanding of any field.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I do think publishing a book does require a little bit of hubris, a lot of curiosity and patience. So for other people out there who are interested in writing a technical or a business book, are there any things that you would warn them? And now that you've been through the process of writing your own?
I would start with it's going to take a lot of time. If you're not willing to dedicate the time and have the passion behind it, like if you're not, to Jeremy's point from earlier, if you don't have the passion behind it, you might not make it through. Because if, on a per hour basis of like, how much money do you make out of this? It's probably not some astronomical figure compared to what you could be doing for your day job or consulting or doing something else. It's really driven by this underlying passion and drive. I would say that's one part.
Yeah, I think heads up on the time, like buckle up here. You're signing for a lot of hours. I think that's probably the biggest gotcha.
I would say as first time authors, having your help, Jess, throughout the process for as a first time author, that's extremely helpful. Probably like second or third or fourth, maybe like they've kind of figured it out at that point and kind of know the ropes and know their way through it. But it is pretty difficult as first time authors because there's so much in the domain that like even if you ask AI to help you do something, it's not navigating like those relationships and the expectations and what are the incentives and objectives of the people on the other side of the table. It's really hard to understand what that is without some type of assistance and help.
It is interesting that publishing is centuries old and AI still isn't trained on enough material to help you do it step by step. It's such a unique process and it is so based on relationships and how you navigate them. So what's next for you? Are you thinking about writing another book after this?
I mean, I need a break. That was a lot of work. I think next steps for us at the time of recording, the book is still under pre-order. It'll be available on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles. And I think we're excited to go out and share it with the world after having worked on it so hard over the last year. We're really excited for people to dive into it, see what they think. And then we're busy kind of applying all of those concepts we talked about at Pattern. So, we are practitioners of what we do right now. We're very busy building a lot of stuff. And that's a lot of fun too.
Yeah, you got a lot of building, some consulting and some helping as part of that, but also some conferences, stuff like podcasts to share the key learnings and key concepts and ideas. There has been a book that I've been like working on kind of within the AI space, but as a little bit more general audience as far as the lessons that you need to know in interacting with AI systems as like regular people with a more general audience. But that's someday maybe that will see the light of day. For now, it's essays that I post on the blog and things like that.
Yeah, that is impressive that you published this whole book and had a full-time job in the meantime. So congrats on that. Major kudos. Getting the book published is a huge feat and it's worth celebrating, but it's just step one. It's got to get the word out. You've invested so much time and energy in writing. And then, it does require still a lot more energy to get it in front of people. So don't be shy. Definitely make sure everybody knows about it. Hit them over the head with it. So what's next for you? Are you thinking about writing another book after this? You need a break or are you ready to keep going?
I mean, I need a break. That was a lot of work. I think next steps for us, obviously, right now at the time of recording, the book is still under pre-order. By the time this comes out, it'll be available on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles. And I think we're excited to go out and share it with the world after having worked on it so hard over the last year. We're really excited for people to dive into it, see what they think. And then we're busy kind of applying all of those concepts we talked about at Pattern. So, we are practitioners of what we do right now. We're very busy building a lot of stuff. And that's a lot of fun too. So that's kind of the immediate future for both of us.
Yeah, you got a lot of building, some consulting and some helping as part of that, but also some conferences, stuff like podcasts to share the key learnings and key concepts and ideas. For now, it's essays that I post on the blog and things like that. At thewhybehindai.com. It's where we post essays. We keep things a little bit lighter there. Many concepts from our book end up there or have ended up there, although the blog form is a little bit lighter and more entertaining and has better memes, to be honest. And then the book itself is Architected Intelligence, and you can find us on LinkedIn.
It's been a pleasure speaking to you and hearing more about the book and the whole process you went through. Congrats again. Please, everyone, do order a copy of Architected Intelligence, available where books are sold. And hope to talk to you guys again soon. I can't wait to see where this goes, and I hope all the success for your book.
Thanks, Jess.
Thank you.